just kind of watch it a little bit so we get some record.
It's going.
The hand close. So, I wasn't going to worry about it, but then when I thought, okay, let's show this cool idea, stuff up a little bit closer, and so we'll go a little bit faster. So let me talk about some general safety stuff for the things that's going on in the lab here. So in general, you guys, we're going to be using these tables. So this wooden table, that one down there, and we'll have those benches behind you cleared off. And so when we're actually working on engines and doing this kind of thing, we'll kind of utilize this space in here. And I'll talk about what tools you're going to have. So we've got enough tools that every group can have their own tools, so we're not going to get minimal tool sharing for COVID and all that kind of stuff or whatever. So there's going to be minimal of that. So eye protection is going to be required all the time in here when we're doing stuff. So I'm not going to require it today just because we're talking. We're not actually going to really be doing anything. So I won't require it today, but you are going to need some eye protection. That box right in front of you there, so you're Haley? Megan.
Yeah.
Help me, and I'm going to keep. I'm bad at names to
No, it's
begin
okay,
with, and
it's
then
okay.
your face is half covered up. It's like, yeah, so help me out. If you guys want a pair of lures, so you can take one, have it for your own. You can keep a little sleeve or whatever, keep it from getting scratched up, and bring them back, and then you know you'll have a clean pair that's yours that somebody else has used or whatever. So you're welcome to that. If you're going to get your own, you have a set that you know, or maybe some prescription safety glasses or something like that that you're going to use and you need to take one. So we have them, and I'll issue you that. If you forget them, there's a box up there that says that Granger box, and it's all the leftovers that get chucked in there. And so when you put them on, you can half see out of them. You know how that goes with people who take care of safety glasses. So just be aware of that. So if you want good safety glasses, bring yours, or if you want a pair that fits whatever, it's up to you. But that's going to be required. We're also going to require, and we're thinking through this, we're going to require on the whole semester, we're going to require closed-toe shoes. So no saying with the flip-flops or that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to get too fussy about shorts for a lot of the stuff that we do because we're not going to be working with hot stuff or anything most of the time. Now, when we do the dynamometer lab, then long pants. So because thing gets hot and we have to pump water through it and it comes out as really hot water. So if we have a hose leak or something like that, we're going to have hot water out and it's going to cool with more protection. So that's the thing. So basically, eye protection is there. When we do these engines, run the engines, we'll provide hearing protection for you. So some of the stuff we're going to do outside with tractors, and that's because it's outside, you don't have the closed-in space, and the volume level is not too bad. So I won't require them, and we're going to run this one and another tractor in the other lab. And we put all kind of weird fuels through this, so that's one of the things we're going to do this semester. Hopefully we'll have time to get that done. But put on a dynamometer, and then I get on the Kroger, and I send Bonnie down to Kroger actually, and he gets a couple gallons of cooking oil. So we just pour cooking oil in that engine, and it runs like cooking oil. So that's kind of fun. So we'll do that and see what kind of power we get out of that. So that, at least that's the intention at this point, unless it looks like schedule, we're going to go really crazy or something like that. So those labs, you know, it's hot stuff, and you have to watch them carefully. So that's that, okay? We do have on the rack right inside the door there's some lab coats, some long coats. You don't have to if you want to, but if you've got an interview or something and you want to wear nice clothes to come in here, you may want to protect them, so you can grab one of those and put them on. You're welcome to use those. So I don't necessarily require them. So sometimes I wear them just to protect my clothes. So I tell people I don't do my own laundry. Unfortunately, in that respect, I want to keep it that way. So I keep the oil off of them. Just be aware that these benches back there are hydraulics, fluid power, and you get near them, you got oil on you. So just be careful and stay away from those things. If you got anything really nice, they will mess it up. They look pretty nice. All right, makes sense. Good deal. Cool. All right, let's walk down and look at the dynamometer just for a few minutes. Since we're here, we can see this, and I think we're going to use it next week. We're going to spend time on this. But, I don't know how if any of you have gotten to that video yet, where I describe this thing, describe what a dynamometer is. If you ever have a chance to do that, and that's what I was for next week. So, it's not yet. So that's fine. inside of mom, this is what we're going to use. And so I just quickly, and I have a video that describes it as well. I wanted to be able to see it physically and put your hands on it. So what this is going to do is measure the power output. Actually, what it technically measures is the torque that engine produces. In this case, the tractor. So when we're looking at the power takeoff shaft, so the rotating shaft is on the back of the tractor. And it measures how much torque that thing can produce. So it measures torque. And everybody see the videos? What else do we need to get power? So we have torque, and there's another component to see. Yeah, the torque and speed. We need those two things. So this will give me how much torque that thing produces. And then we'll have another meter that will measure the speed that is rotating. And then we can do the math on it to calculate what kind of power output we get from it. So that's what they are. So it's pretty simple. I mean, it's literally inside this box there is just a big brake drum. It's like the brakes on your automobile. And when that shaft starts spinning and we have a control knob wheel and we turn, it just starts to put the brakes on and grab that thing and slow it down and make it work. So that's literally all it's doing. It's a pretty simple machine. When it does that, this bar on the back is actually connected to that brake drum, so it tries to rotate, it tries to turn, and then we have this electronic doohickey gizmo gadget there, which is a force transducer, a force sensor. And so it's going to measure force for it. So we have force, that rotation, which you'll see in the videos if you've watched them yet. So we have a moment arm from there to there, so there's the force and the distance. There's my torque. Okay, so that's what we get. So that measures torque, so that's when rotating measures torque, and then we measure the speed and everything when we get power. So, and then we can keep loading that down. So we put a little load on it, we put more load on it, and we get a performance curve out of it. So like I described those in the videos, so you see that in the videos. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at. I think next week, I think I'm going to step the labs up a little bit. We'll celebrate the front of the class here. Okay, questions about that? Does it make sense? You guys are awful quiet and just stand and watch. I know I'm not that good at communicating, so feel free to ask questions or if it's maybe way out of your line, but that's okay, I understand that. There you see it. This whole tank down here is full of water. So we hooked up the hose because if you got a brake there and all it's doing is just dragging on that thing, it gets hot and really, really fast. So we pump water through it to keep it cool, keep it from melting itself down. So that's why we have hot water coming out of this hose. This thing will get hot. If we're not careful, it'll get hot enough to get it. Makes sense? Good. Alright, so cool. That'll be fun. We'll make it grow and everything. Then when we do put the conventional oil in it, we take the exhaust tube off of it because it smells like French fries. The exhaust smells like French fries. Alright, good. Let's come on back up here. And do some stuff. Talk about some things. So, alright, tool ID. So, give me an idea where you guys are at in terms of ability so that I know what we're dealing with. And the reason I ask that, and this is what I'm trying to get at, I've had students in the past that I've worked with in these classes, and they've never seen some of these wrenches, basic drafted or something like that. They've never even used them. And that's fine, that's good. And then, I've obviously got gearhead kind of people that have rebuilt engines and stuff, all their life. So give me an idea of where you guys are at, kind of experience-wise on that. And please don't be bashful with like, hey, I haven't seen this stuff. But I want to make sure that I'm not losing everybody, and I want to make sure that we're not, that I'm not boring the complete heck out of everybody. So this might bore the heck out of some people. So where are you guys at? So
for me, I've taken the small engines class before.
Okay.
So I'm kind of familiar with 4-stroke engines, how to take it apart and put it back together. I'm pretty familiar with that.
Okay. Is that in high school? Is that a high school group? Okay. So Voag, FFA, kind of thing. Cool. All right. Somebody else.
My dad owns an auto repair business, but does that mean I listen? Kind of, sort of, but I've been around it my whole life.
Come on in. Yep. So you passed that opportunity.
I've handed the tools. Do I know what they're called? Usually, hand me that thing.
Yeah, that thing. Or he's got a. Sometimes what happens is they'll have a weird name for it.
Yeah.
So all my life this was a knuckle skinner. So I never knew what the official name was. But we
I got an A+ when it came to take your daughter to work day, but I'm not about that.
Okay, good. So other folks, you guys.
I work on cars. My niche is like older BMWs, so buying, selling, and whatnot. So pretty familiar with what we're going to do.
Okay, sounds good. What about you?
Rebuilt a couple of spring strike engines, some familiar
A little bit familiar. Good. Yeah.
I understand basic stuff.
Basic stuff. Okay, good.
I have no past experience with any of this.
No, good. Cool. All right. None of the basics. Right. So good. Come on in here. So we're good. So yeah, what we're gonna do is we're gonna spend a few minutes here and look at and we're gonna focus first of all on the basic tools that we're gonna use. And for some of you, like you say, you've seen them all your life, you've used them or whatever. And maybe we'll throw a little bit of new stuff to you, some things that you maybe hadn't really thought about and so forth. And then we'll discuss, why we use different tools in different situations and stuff like that. So yeah, some of this might be a little bit boring. Some of you are going to go, and some of you are going to be like, yeah, I need this, especially if I'm going to be teaching this stuff at some point. So we're going to have some basic understanding. So this is every group is going to get a toolkit, something like this. So it's going to look like that. So that's what you're going to have to be able to work with. So these are really nice. So you guys are salivating. Yeah, those are really nice too. So yeah, they haven't even been out of the box yet, have they? So we have a couple sets in here that are similar. They're not the Craftsman brand, but they have similar capabilities. So this has almost everything that you're going to need to tear your engine apart to do that work. So it has the basic stuff in here. All right. So let's kind of start through some of the basic things. And I've got some tools over here, and I've got a bolt with a nut on it. So there's a little bit of terminology for you. So I've got a bolt. That's generally a bolt. We screw a nut onto the bolt. All right. So what if I have something like this that uses in a machine without a nut? So it just screws into some threaded piece. What do we call that typically? So there you go. Now I've got the gearheads going. So often we'll talk about that as being a stud. Okay? So if it's used, if I'm bolting, if I'm fastening two things together, and I've got a hole and this goes through, and I put this nut onto it to hold it together, we used to call that a bolt and nut. But a lot of times, if we just use this and there's a hole in there somewhere and I screw it into, we'll talk about that as being a stud. So if it's big. Now, if it's small, we often talk about it being a machine screw. So we'll be a screw. So it's the same kind of thing, it's just a lot smaller. So you'll see some different terms like that for different things. So now, from an engineering standpoint, when we're designing things, that's like a really big deal. So when we're specifying parts and stuff like that, when you're going to the box and Dad's sending you to get the tool or whatever, give me that little, he might call it a bolt, he might call it a stud, who knows what they call it. But that's kind of one of the official things like that. So that's what these are for. And then these wrenches are basically to get that off. So that turns really nice. And so I can screw that all the way down there, and then it gets tight, and I need to tighten it up. And then if I'm not strong enough, how do I get it loose? So that's when I need to use these wrenches, right? So if I need to get that nut off, where would you start? What's that? Get a wrench, right? Which wrench you gonna pick up? So this is actually a 1/2-inch bolt, so it's 3/4, so it's SAE. So there's a good question. So we're gonna have some stuff that you can deal with. You're gonna be metric sizes. And some stuff is going to be 1/4 inch. I think these engines are mostly metric, so most of what you're going to deal with, I think a 10mm socket will take most of that engine apart when it comes down to it. But those are going to be metric bolts. But yeah, there's some of them that are metric sizes, and some of them that are going to be SAE sizes. So any idea what SAE stands for? So that's how Society of Automotive Engineers, absolutely. So they've kind of standardized some of that kind of stuff. So you say SAE, and that's where it comes from, right? So a couple different things that they could use to pull this off. So I don't even know which sizes these are. I can't see it. No, it's this one. It's a big one. So I got cheaters in my safety glasses. That's why nobody touches motorbikes. You get sick if you would, probably trip over yourself. All right, so yeah, the first time you wear bifocals, you ever have to do that, go up and down stairs, man, you're gonna die. So, getting old. It's part of that getting old. All right, so there's the wrench. Typically, the sizes are stamped on them somehow. So this is a 3/4. These millimeter sizes over here are going to be stamped on somewhere. So there's a 17 in there. So you'll be able to know what size it is. All right. So, we just grab hold of it. In the right way. OCD people. I should put it in backwards and see who goes crazy. I'll find out who's OCD. All right, so we can put that wrench on there and turn it. Which end should I use? Does it matter? Does it matter? Is it preference? Okay, there is a difference. There is a reason why we might need to use this end. Okay, now depending on the application, so if this bolt was in somewhere and tight and I needed to get to it, I couldn't get this over the end of it and get on it. So what I need to do is use this end as well. So this we call an open end wrench. So it's got an open end. That end we call a caught you, tricked you. It's a box end. So the official term. So yeah, so you think open or closed, that's where you start through the curve. I did that on purpose. So yeah, we typically call that a box end. So this would be a box end, this would be an open end. And this wrench, because it has both, is a combination. So different wrench kits, and I don't think I have any here. Yeah, so here's one that's got two different sizes and they're both kind of open end. So although not really, what is that? There's something a little bit different. I'll come back to that in just a minute. All right, so yeah, this one I couldn't get this on there, so I'd have to use the open end to get on there. But if I had a choice, and this was really, really, really tight, which end would I like to use? What do you think? The box, and why? Explain why.
Gives you more grip.
More grip, why?
Whole way around.
It's the whole way around it, okay? So let's think about that. So let's look at how this wrench engages that bolt. And if I turn it, there's some play in there, there's some slop. But how many points does that wrench touch that bolt? Can you see? That's kind of small, but what do you think? How many? 3. How many sides on it? There's 6 sides. Now if you look at this, what actually happens is you end up with 2 sides. So when this turns, so I have this point right there that is engaging this side of the wrench, right? And these over here don't engage down through here, but I have this point down on this side. So right there by my finger, that point engages, these don't. So what I end up is really, because I have to have some play, I have to have some clearance for that wrench to go on there, I only have 2 points where that wrench is going to engage that bolt. If this is really tight, and maybe this is a little bit rusty and old, and I put this wrench on there and crank on it, I'm going to have a tendency, if it's not in good shape, to start to round those corners off. And if I round those corners off, life gets really bad, right? So if I put this end on there, the box end on there, now there's 6 sides, and what you'll find is if you look in there, I have a point on that wrench that's engaging all 6 of those points. So now I have 6 points that's transmitting that torque. And so I don't have as much force on each one of those individual points. I have less of a tendency to round them off. Okay, so I usually, the default for me, if I can do it, I grab the box end and I'll put the box end on and try to turn the thing. All right, if I can't get in there, or if it's really loose and I just want to be able to go fast, I might use that end. So there is some thought process for which end of that I would put on there, which end I would use. Okay, so if you want to think about that, is how many points is that wrench engaging that thing, and am I going to run the risk of rounding the corners off or something like that? Okay, makes sense? So, learned something already a little bit, at least thinking through some things, okay? So, we grab things all the time, but sometimes we need to think through, what is the best tool for the job for this particular application. All right, cool. So, that's one option to do it. What else could I do? So, one of the things that I hate about wrenches, I shouldn't say hate, but if I have limited clearance, so this bolt is in here, up against something like that, so I can put this on and I turn it, and then my wrench hits it here. So then I have to lift it off and do it again and turn it. So I got to keep lifting and turning. So what's the better way, a faster way to do it? Ratchet. All right. So what's a ratchet? That's this thing over here, right? So let me see. Yeah, so I'll grab this. So this is a ratchet. I got a couple of them here. Oh, man, these are nice wrenches. These are really good. It sounds really good. You turned these yet, bro?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Over one of them tested.
Wow. Yeah, so, alright, so there's a ratchet. Now that doesn't look like it does anything, so we need a connection on the end of it. So we grab, what do we need? A socket. Let me find a 3/4 socket. So there's a 3/4 socket. So the sizes are on the side here I'm looking at. So here's a 3/4 socket. So I look on the end of it. Oh, look at that. So there's 6 sides in that socket that should be able to engage that thing and turn it. So sweet. So that's the socket that would go on. There's a square side on the other side, right? So that square side goes on the ratchet. These have a little button that you push so that it goes on, and then that holds it captive on there. Sometimes you just snap them on. So they can go in a couple different ways. So that's what you can do it. So how many points on that one? How many sides in there? 6, exactly to match it. Now let's see, I have one over here that has, how many? A whole bunch, right? How many's on the box end? Any idea? 6. Well, if these are 6 sides here, it's got to be in a multiple of 6. So it's going to be 12. Yeah, it's going to be 2 of them, so it's going to be 12. So what you find in there is 12 points. So there's the same size, 3/4 socket. It'll still engage that bolt like that. But one has 6 points and one has 12 points. So let's talk about a 6 point and 12 point. So which one do I pick if I have a choice? Does it matter? Okay, why?
Just because you can get all the sides.
Get all the sides. This one is also going to get all the sides, but what you find is that all the sides in there are shorter. So these are like little points. And so when you actually look at how that engages this bolt, so if this is, the corner of the bolt, whatever, that 12 point is only going to engage just the tips of it. That 6 point is going to engage a lot more of it. So again, if I have a choice and it's really tight and maybe a rusty bolt or something like that, if I can, I want to go find that 12 point socket so that I can grab a hold of that. It's going to grab that a little bit better and have less risk of rounding the corners of messing that hole up. So, I want it to be able to engage it. Okay, does it make sense? So 6 point versus 12 points. So why do they make 12 points if 6 points better? Any idea? Yeah. Demonstration. See if this works. So I got a 12 point right here, okay? And let's say, and this often happens, I get that bolt in a situation where I've got a really, really tight clearance, right? So the wrench can only move from there to there. Now you guys see it already, right? So I grab a hold of this bolt and I turn it until the wrench stops, and then I lift it up and go back and try to get another bite. And you go again, okay? So think about how far with a 6 point side over this wrench, I have to be able to go at least 1/6 of a turn to grab that next point to be able to turn it, right? So I have to at least go, and then sometimes I can't get in there, it won't fit, and it doesn't go. See, this gives me a little bit more less movement that I have to have because I only have to go 1/2 of a 1/6 of a turn, so 1/12 of a turn. So I can lift it up, go 1 notch, and grab it, and this is a pain. But to do that, to be able to turn it that many times, but I can do it. So I got, shorter strokes, I can get hold of it, I can be a little bit more efficient with my turns and be able to get it done. So that's one of the advantages of that. So I don't have to be as precise when I put them on there. So I can be less precise with the 12 point than I have to with the 6 point. But the 6 point is going to hold better and give me better, less chance of rounding off the points. Making sense? All right. Is this too basic? A little bit? Is it helping? Making you think about things a little bit?
Never thinking about this kind of stuff.
You just grab it and go, right? So, you got all this pile of different tools here. Like, why do I have all this thing
There
there?
are times I've been in that position where you have need 1/6, but you can't get your.
Yep. Now, there is a trick with this one because this is not straight. So you see that end is not straight, and so you guys have done that. So I get it, flip the wrench over, and then I can get the 1/12 out of it that way. But I have to flip the wrench over every time to get that, to make that happen. So, and it's still a pain that drives you nuts when you're in a position like that. But that's where the ratchet is nice because, and I didn't show you what the ratchet does, but it ratchets back and forth. And I've got directionality, so I can ratchet this way, tighten that way, and flip the handle on the back, and I can tighten this way and ratchet that way. So I can go in either direction. So, which way do most things go? Righty tighty, lefty loosey. Yep, you've heard that. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. So, okay, this is about righty tighty. What gets you squirrely is when you're trying to go the other way. So, righty from that side, so lefty. So, yep, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Now you will run into left-handed thread things on occasion. So, and that they're actually fairly common on engines. So, because I have a shaft that's rotating, and so if I have to put a bolt in the end of the shaft, which you do on flywheels and on the crankshaft end of your engine, so a lot of times you have to put a bolt in there. So if that shaft rotates this way, doesn't look like a bolt, if it rotates this way, that shaft, if something will touch this bolt and that shaft is rotating this way, it's going to have a tendency to back that bolt out. And so what it would sometimes do, they do manufacture left-handed threads. So that would be a lefty-loosey. That way when that engine is turning, when that shaft is turning, if something lays against that bolt, it's going to want to tighten the bolt instead of loosening it and backing it out and the thing fall apart. Okay? So you do run into that. So you ever change pedals on your bicycle? There's a good example. You ever pull the pedal off? Pedal on one side is right-handed thread, pedal on the other side is left-handed thread, just for that reason. As you're pedaling on the one side, it's trying to back that bolt out of the pedal of the bicycle. So one side goes the opposite way. So anybody that's ever stripped out a pedal on the left side is like, what is, it's backwards, it's left-handed thread. And a lot of times on those, they'll have an L on it. So when you buy a set of pedals, if you put on the replacement pedals, you look on the end of it, one will have R and one will have L on it. So it's left-handed thread and it's right-handed thread. So that's a good example of where that stuff comes from. So that's what the ratchet does for me. So put it on there. If I want to loosen it, I switch it the right way, and then I can ratchet as far as I can until the wrench hits something, go back, just keep going like that, and it backs it right up, loosens it up, takes it up the same way. Ratchet it in, take it up. Cool? Basics, really easy. I want to take the nut off, same thing, I'll put that on there. Yeah, now what do I do? Deep well, there you go. Do I have a 3/4 right there? Yep. So socket, same exact thing. 6 points on the one side, square side on the other side. So this one, if I take this short one off, go away, put this deep well, I'm going to call it. Put that deep well on there, stick it on there. It reaches down over, that's all that. There you go. Now, the wrench is down, the nut is down in a hole somewhere, and I can't get the wrench down into it. Now what do I do? Get an extension, yeah, so we have these things. There are extensions over here, so I can take that extension, all that is the square thing on both ends. Make it longer, put that on there, stick that in there, and I can put that way down in there. Turn it like that. Okay. So that's what those extensions do for us, okay? Now, some people just like extensions because they like to hold a ratchet like that, So I grab a hold of it and everything and turn it, and the thing is really tight. Because it's a good idea to have that extension on there when I'm trying to loosen the bolt. So, here's my problem. And you can you can see it already. You can see what I'm doing. So the bolt is fairly straight, and I grab that wrench. What's happening to the wrench? You see it tilting over. You see it leaning to the side. So if I'm trying to loosen or tighten this thing, I'm pulling on the end of the handle. So like I talked about, I'm going to have a tendency, especially if this is an old rusty bolt or something like that, I'm going to have a tendency for that thing to slip off, bend over, and it will start to mangle the corners of these bolts. And once you start to mangle it, it's bad news. It's gone. And then you start looking for hacksaws or grinders or different things like that to cut it off, or drills to drill it out or something like that. So doing it right the first time. So use the extensions if you need to reach in somewhere, but if you don't need it, don't use the extension so that you're closer and you don't have that sideward force that's going to have a tendency to want to bring that wrench off and twist it at an angle. Make sense? Cool. All right. These come in all different sizes. So typical sizes, despite whether you're using metric sockets or SAE, English unit sockets, typically three different size drives that you're going to see for most of the small engine work like this. So the bigger ones are, we talk about being a 1/2 inch drive. So what that means is that this square on here is a 1/2 inch. So that socket has a big 1/2 inch on it, so it would snap onto that. Okay, so the ones that we're just using would not. So that square is too small and it fit on it. So 1/2 inch drive, we've got a bigger one. 3/8 down here. 1/4 inch is the smallest one. And you'll find that a lot of these sockets, as you get to the smaller sockets, they're going to have that still. There's a 1/4 inch, there's a 1/4 inch. So if you don't need big wrench, use a small wrench, they go faster, they're lighter, and easier to handle, and all that. Cool. Make sense? Questions so far? Easy stuff. Am I missing something, Donnie?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Alright, so other cool stuff. Let me put these nice wrenches back in there. Get them mixed up with my old wrenches. Alright, so.
Oh, I will say, some of you cheaper ratchets, I don't think these this way, but some of them, the tighten and loosen switch is backwards. And that's really
Oh, really? So you just gotta try it, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a standard, all Craftsman stuff. It means you put the handle toward the direction you want it to turn. So, but if it doesn't work that way, yeah, just switch it out. And you'll see sometimes, I have some that have a ring on it instead of a handle. There's a ring that you turn, so there's different ways that you can turn it back and forth. So, again, that's how you do it. Some other cool things, so there's the extension I put in there. This thing's pretty cool. See what that is? What do we call that? Any idea? Got a universal. It'll turn, do all that kind of stuff. So what I can do is, I'm going to make a big long train here. So I got this bolt, and it's right underneath something. And it's hard to get to. So what I do is I take this universal joint, I take my 3/4 socket, I'm going to snap it on the end of there. And I'm going to need my extension to go on that. I'm going to need my 3/8 drive ratchet. And see, I can have it sideways and it's return. Cool. So I can reach in and kind of go around the corner. If I can't get straight onto it, I don't have room, I can go around the corner and be able to turn it. So that'll help you sometimes if you need to really hard places. These are goofy because they don't turn smooth. Universal joint, and there's a lot of theory to that. You want to see the math sometime? I'll show you. Probably not. My engineers have to learn that math. Okay? So, but yeah, you can go around the corner if you want to. Why do I make the money math? Because I'm mean. That's what I mean. Okay, so there's the fundamental basic part of the wrenches that you're going to use. Let's see. These things over here. I didn't get any Allen wrenches. Allen bolts. Got any of those that are Allen's up in there?
this is well on.
What's that? Nah, he threw them out already. So Allen wrenches. So 6-sided. They go inside. So there's a hexagon right there. All different sizes. So you have both metric and English in those two those sets there. So if you do that, so what you're going to have is a socket with an indentation that's going to match that. If you can find me one, that'll be awesome. If not, that's not a big deal. Basically, you'll have a hole, a 6-sided hole, and these come out of the holes like that. Put them in the hole and turn it. So that's an Allen wrench, an Allen key. What people call it an Allen key, even though it's really just a wrench.
Okay. Torx head.
There, the Torx head is something different. So, and you've got a lot of Torx on your engines. So Torx, so there's an indentation, and a lot of people will tend to grab an Allen wrench to go into here, but these are different. So pass that around so you can see it up close. Oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Oh well, we just passed the virus. Here we go. So look at the hole. You see it's not an even 6-sided. It looks more like a star. Okay. You can get, if you find the right size Allen wrench and shove it in there, the normal 6-sided wrench like this, it will turn it. As long as you don't have to turn it real hard, but it really has a tendency to round the holes off on the inside or round those points off. And once those points get rounded off, you're in trouble again, right? So there are some torques. Oh, there's a big one. Yeah, there's a big Allen's socket head. So I don't think this wrench is big enough for that one, is it? So it goes down in there. It's not even quite big enough. So there's a big one. But it would go in there if it was a little bit bigger. It would turn out. So it would go down inside there. So that's what an Allen would do. The Torx is more of a star configuration, so you got to be careful of that and look carefully at what you got, because a lot of what you have are stars. And these are the stars here, so I don't know which one this would be. And you kind of see pictures when you pull these little kits out of there, so you can kind of see pictures of what you got in there. So pull, I guess it's this size. And that would go in there and it engages in there with that star configuration. So be careful between Allens and stars, because like I say, you can take the Torx and shove it in and make it work on an Allen. You can take an Allen wrench and shove it in and make it work on the Torx hole, but you're going to strip it out. You're going to have a tendency to really strip it out, so you got to be careful with that. So those are the bits. And again, there's a lot of bolts on the outside and everything of these engines. They're going to use these Torx bits. Okay, make sense? No difference? Got it like that? The Torx actually engage pretty well, so that's the reason we've seen a lot more Torx, because they engage better than an Allen, because it's a star configuration, so those points engage a little bit tighter. They don't have as much of a tendency to strip over time when we get older, so see a lot of people using it. So these little bits, now they are small, so I can't really turn them with my fingers, so I gotta have something else to turn them with, and I'm guessing that's this one. Yep. So this little socket, this little piece that comes in there, has a 6-sided, has a square on one side for a ratchet, and has a 6-sided on the other side for these things to drop into, like that. So then I can use my ratchet and put on that little adapter, and it'll turn this Torx out there. Okay? And I can put any of these bits that are in this little kit inside that adapter, and then be able to use it with the ratchet. Or, if I don't want to mess with the ratchet, then I have this handle, so I can turn it into a screwdriver, or any kind of a bit. I can do that, so I can exchange those bits. So if it's turning really easy, and I don't want to mess with the big heavy ratchet, I can put it on like that. Yeah, makes sense? Cool so far? Right. Now I'm getting bored. You're all looking bored. That's good. Alright, so that's basically what's in there. Any questions? Every group will have your own kit. No, you don't get to take them home. I'm salivating over this kid. These are nice. There you go. There it is. Put them in there. So, couple two other unusual pieces in here. So look at these sockets. They're set apart. These guys probably know already what they are. So pass them around, look in the end of it. Tell me what you see in it. What am I going to see in there?
Spark plug socket.
Yeah, it's a spark plug socket. So what's inside? There's some padding in there, some rubber. So the spark plugs. There's one here.
There's one in this engine.
Oh yeah, they'll come out. Yeah, there you go. So there's a spark plug on the top of the engine. Yep, so that's all in there. So they're generally two sizes. There's some variations on that. Either a 5/8 or a 13/16. I think that's a 13/16. Yep. So generally the two sizes. So they go on there. This is porcelain, so it will break. So it's a glass, porcelain is what it is. So it will break. So these sockets go on. It's a 3/4. No, so it goes down on there. When you push it on, you're going to feel that porcelain going up into that rubber part of the ratchet, and what that does is protects that porcelain. So if for some reason I twist this or do something that I shouldn't do, it's not going to break that white porcelain piece and won't break it. So always use these spark plug sockets when you're pulling the spark plugs out of the engine. So it should have all the kits. I think those other kits have spark plugs. Don't worry about it. I think they do, but we'll be careful of that. So.
Well, I think it's different anyways. I'll check on something. There's a. I think these are.
They may only have the 5/8 or something.
Yeah, some of these also don't have the quick release, so you gotta kind of fight.
You gotta pull it
socket
off,
on
yeah,
off.
so they don't have the button to release it, they just snap off. Alright, good deal. Questions? Spark plugs, yeah, that's all the stuff that's in there. So, when you're done, make sure you snap everything down in there because these things fold up, and if you don't do that, then they fall out and they open it up and you get socket going all over the place, and then you hear it leak. Alright, what's this one do? What do you think? What do we call that? Just gonna do it first. That's all. Just a speed brake. I mean, it's literally what it's for. So if I have something I have to turn a long way, I put it on there and I can go really fast. But most of us that are around shops or something like that are gonna have an air tool. So like NASCAR has, you know, to change tires. And then you put that in the socket and pull the button. But this is kind of like the poor man's air tool. You don't get a lot of torque. You can't make things real tight. And if it's tight, you're not going to get it loose. But once it's loose, you can get it off really, really fast. So that's why you can use that for. Here's a wrench. So there's that. Here's an odd-looking wrench. Right. My idea what that one's called? See that? So what's the difference? It's kind of like the open end, right? But it wraps around a little bit. So how many points is this one going to grab when I go to turn? So this one, it actually has 5 sides in here. So it's actually going to grab 5 sides. It won't grab the 6th one, but this one will grab 5 sides. So I'm going to get a better connection than I will with this open end wrench. But why is it open and partially wrapped around? What we call this is a line wrench. So these are commonly used if you've got a hose or a piece of line that I can't get this box end over, obviously. But this will be big enough just to get through it, and then I can slide it down onto the nut. I think it'll work on this bolt yet, so it'll work on this bolt. So I can slide it over the bolt and then up on the nut and be able to turn it. So I can do something like that. Okay? And this is actually a 3/4 socket. So put it on the nut, go and turn it. So that's what it works. So we call that a line wrap. So it wraps around, gives us a little bit more, a few more points of connection so that I don't strip things off. Alright. I said somebody earlier, you know, sometimes we have weird names for stuff. When I grew up, this was always a knuckle skinner. So, or they're also called what? What's the other common name people use for these? So everybody ever hear them call them the crescent legs? Yeah. So what is crescent? It's like Kleenex, right? It's a brand name. So Crescent is a brand name. So this is just an adjustable wrench. So what this one will do is you turn this little nut right here and it opens and closes. So if you don't know what size you got, and you know, if you're going out to a field or something like that, and you don't want to take an armload of wrenches with you, you can take something like this and you'll be able to adjust it to fit whatever you need it to work, right? Well, you're laughing, why?
Good for everything, but not good.
It's good for everything but good for nothing at the same time, right? Because, you know, that's adjustable, and, you know, already it's like that open end wrench. So already I only have 2 points of contact, and it's relying on how tight I make it with this adjustment with my thumb. And these really have a tendency, they're the worst at rounding the corners off. If you've got something that's really tight, that's rusty or something like that, these are absolutely the worst. And again, that's why we always call them knuckle skinners. That's just what I knew them as, because they'll slip off. If you don't get them really tight, they'll round off and the skin your knuckles. You'll be pushing on something and spin your knuckles. So we always call them knuckle skinners. But yeah, it's an adjustable wrench is really what it is. So I can adjust it, it's kind of handy. We see a lot of farmers and folks that just carry something like this on their belt in a pouch. And if they need something quick to just do some adjustment or something like that, and pull that out in their garden. So it's handy to have, good to have in your toolbox, but it shouldn't be the first thing you go after. First thing you should be going after is a wrench or a socket and do it right. Okay, so some other variations on that. This was kind of crazy. So there's another, of course this is a big ratchet. But there, if you've got some clearance problems, you can tilt the handle up a little bit. And so you got just kind of like that universal there, but you can get the handle out of the way, so that makes it nice. These, what are these called? Yeah, breaker bar. I'm not talking about that in one video. When we measured, this was the one where we had the ratchet that was short. So these are both 1/2-inch drives. So there's the ratchet that's short. So if I get a hold of the end of it, I can't get a lot of torque because I have limited force here. So if I move that force further away, that same force, I get a lot more torque and I can turn it. Okay. So, and if I still can't do it, then what do? Hammer, or either hammer on the end of it, or get a big long piece of pipe, right, and put on the end of a turret so it gives longer torque. So generally, you do not want to put pipe on the end of this because those are ratchets in there. That's a mechanism, and so if you put too much torque on that mechanism, you're going to have a tendency to damage it, to break that mechanism. So that's what these are designed for. Even though they don't tell you that, they are designed that you can put a pipe on them and get a little bit more torque out of them within reason. Okay? So think about that when you're cranking really hard and stuff. You don't want to damage that ratchet mechanism in that head there. So this doesn't have that same mechanism you can damage it. So it's longer, gives you more moment on to be able to pull it out. All right, so turn it. And once you do strip the thing off, then what do you go for? What do you guys go for? If you strip the bolt off, it's rusty. What's the next thing you go after?
I go for a drill.
You go for a drill. Yep. So that might be it. So here's another thing that we can go after. What are these called? And a lot of people call them a vice grips, or at least we did growing up. We call them vice grips, but vice grip is a brand, and actually this is a vice grip brand. So this actually looks like a brand. So we talk about vice grip, but it's just a locking pliers. So I can get a hold of the thing. It's got rounded off, so it's no longer a nice, points on there, the nice hexagon. So I put that on there. I can adjust it with this bolt. And once I get it to about the right adjustment, a little further, then I can grab a hold of it and snap it on there tight. Now that's not going to come off. So it gives me a lot more grip on the thing. Then I can pull on it. So if my problem is I've rounded this old rusty bolt off, I can sometimes use a vice grip like that and grab it over time. So that's the last resort after you've exhausted your other tools. So usually you've got the vice grip because you started with an open-end wrench and rounded it off, and then you went to something else and still rounded it off a little bit more. And it's like, you know what? If I started with that from the beginning, it might have worked out. Not always. Questions? Yep. Good stuff. Another handy thing for you guys that I think we got enough for everybody to have them are these things. So they're called nut drivers. So they look like screwdrivers. You know what screwdrivers are? So they're screwdrivers. That's a pretty common thing. So what kind is that tip? What do we call that? Flathead, what do you call that? Phillips, yeah. I don't know where that came from. It'd be interesting to know the history of Phillips. I just thought of that. Weird things popping in my head sometimes. Why do they call it Phillips? Some guy named Phillips. Phillips 66, probably will tattoo in there. It's probably him. Who knows? But yeah, so that 4-slot configuration in there, so those are the two common ones. One of the most common problems people have is not grabbing the right one. You just find the Phillips and you go to your screw, but there are different sizes, and so having the right size to match with what screw you have is pretty critical, and it's going to protect that screw. So both with the slots and with the Phillips. So you want to think about that slot. If I've got a really big slot and I put that screwdriver in there and turn it, I've only got the very tips of that screwdriver, 2 points, that's turning on that slotted head in there, and I'm going to have a tendency to damage it. So if I get a bigger screwdriver and fill up that slot as much as I can, I'm going to have less tendency to damage it. So again, that's a common mistake people make, is not getting the right size screwdriver. So you want that slotted screwdriver to be big, fill up the slot as much as possible, you're going to have the best chance of turning without slipping it. Same way with the Phillips. Not too big, not too small. So you can get a big one and you can sometimes make it work if you really push down on it and use friction to make it stick in there, but if it's the right size, it'll go down into that screw and lock into that screw really well. So it locks the right size. Good deal? Questions? Still learning a little bit? Yeah. So nut drivers are like screwdrivers, except they work on nuts. Okay. So the end of them are hexagonal, so like a socket. So it's like a socket permanently on this nut driver. Again, you can create nut drivers from your kit with this handle and go down here to these 1/4" drive. That's a 1/4" drive, so you can take any of those sockets and you can make a nut driver. So a lot of your things, this is going to be a pretty fast way because most everything in these brand new engines is not tight. They're not overly tight, so you can go pretty fast and get things off with that. So you can create your nut driver with that handle out of your kit, or you can use these dedicated nut drivers, so they're color coded to the different sizes, and put them into you. Would you say, Donnie, 3 of these will pretty much tear the engine apart? So if you got the right 3, you can pretty much get the engine down and nothing in that part. So that's nut drivers. Those are handy and fast, so you don't get a lot of torque out of it if it's really tight. This isn't going to help you. You're going to have to get into your ratchet to get enough torque to make it loose. But once it's loose, then a lot of people switch to nut driver and do it real fast. Yep.
So like as a future, like whenever you want, when and if we do become teachers, is it just good to have like that on you at like all times in your classroom?
A nut driver?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're doing. So I think the key thing from a teaching standpoint is what I'm trying to communicate to you guys here now. So we learn stuff when we're growing up, and especially in VOAG classes, you're going to have a lot of kids that have a lot of rudimentary practical knowledge, and they've done just grab whatever wrench kind of works and never put the thought into, okay, why do I have these 12 points and 6-point sockets? What's the difference? Why do I use one over the other? And so teaching them that skills, I think, is going to be the more important thing. So not necessarily that you need to have one of these with you. So if you want to look cool, you might want to hang one of these on your belt and a Leatherman or something like that to have some things around. I don't know what kind of atmosphere that you're trying to create in the classroom. But I think that's one of the key things that kids don't always get. And they come in with a lot of preconceived knowledge that, yeah, I know how to do this. That teacher can't teach me anything, because I grew up building engines. It's like, no, I'm going to make you whimper. So when we start doing math, I'm going to make these guys that turn wrenches all the time, they're going to whimper, So when we do the chemistry stuff, they're going to whimper. So, there's other things like that that'll kind of equalize those classes, if that makes sense. Okay, does that kind of answer your question?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah.
So that's what I would really focus on, and that's why I'm focusing on here. I know a lot of this stuff for someone is like, okay, this seems really boring and dumb, but I hope that you're thinking a little bit deeper about the proper tool, because there's a whole variety of stuff, a whole variety of tools that we can use for a lot of different things. All right. So making sense? Nut drivers was the basic stuff. Time to get into it. You're doing good. This is fun. All right, these over here are kind of cool. So I showed you this in that video. If you haven't got to it yet. So what is this? Torque. Yeah, it's a torque wrench. We call it a torque wrench. It's really a meter, so that would probably be the more correct terminology for it. But we really call it a torque wrench. All right. So this is going to actually measure the amount of torque that I'm putting on something. So this is a 3/8 drive, so we're going to have a 3/8 drive socket and put on there so I can grab a hold of it. So if I can put this on something, so you'll have specifications, and we probably won't have time to dig into those with your engine, so we may talk about that with your spark plug, and particularly that's one of the things with the spark plug. They have pretty specific torque requirements on them. So if I want to tighten it, I don't want to tighten it too much. So we'll find out when we start learning about spark plugs, and your book does a really good job explaining this. So if you crank that spark plug in too tight, there's a gasket at the bottom of the spark plug, a washer, and you're going to crush it. And you're actually going to drive that spark plug too far into that combustion chamber on the top of the engine. So there is a correct amount of tightness that you need on it. So if it's too loose, it'll fall out. If it's too tight, I might damage the spark plug, I might damage the engine. So it's a possibility of even damage the engine. So we need to know how much torque to put on, and this will measure that. So, and there's a couple different ones here. I'll look at a couple different ones, but this one you can kind of see mechanically how it's constructed. So there's 2 rods here. These are like the mechanical connection between the end and the handle here. So when I'm turning, I'm pulling on that. Well, they're going to bend a little bit. So when they, as I twist it, more if I'm strong enough and I can't hold it enough to really see it bend, but I can really make that bend a little bit. This rod on the top is not connected up here. So the rod on the top is actually along this scale. So what happens is, when I bend this, and I'm going to kind of force it, but when I bend it, you're going to see that rod move to the side. So you see how I move to the side like that? So what I can do is, as I'm tightening, I look in there and I turn it and turn it and turn it as that rod bends. And if I need 25 foot-pounds or whatever it is, I turn it until that rod says 25, and I quit. I know that's how tight it should be. So that tells me how tight to make something. Okay? So it's generally used for tightening something so that I know how much torque to put on it, the limits that I'm going to do these things. Make sense? So that's what a torque wrench does. It tells me how tight to make something. Right? And they come in a lot of different forms. That's a simple mechanical one. So here's one with a dial, which is kind of cool. So I turn it on, it's got some kind of a mechanism in there. I'm going to put the socket on here, and as I turn it, I'm going to see that dial go. So I go to where that dial is on. And if I've got a little bit more money, I'm going to buying batteries once in a while when I have some that are digital. So they have a little digital readout on them. So that's kind of cool. What you'll see is a lot of wrenches, and we don't have one of these here. I don't think anywhere, but some of them you actually will be able to set it to. So there's a dial on them where you set it to 25 foot-pounds or whatever it is that I want. And then you tighten and tighten and tighten, and then you're going to hear a click. So once it gets to that torque, it's actually going to, there's something that's going to snap inside of it, or a click, and that's it. And then it pops, you're done, you quit. So then it's at the right tightness. So, and you know, when they construct these engines, when they build the engines, every one of the bolts in those engines have a torque specified to it. So when they build it, everything that they do has got to be tightened just exactly right. When we rebuild engines, do we ever do that? We usually don't. The specs are out there. If you wanted to do it correctly, that's really what we should do. But most people won't. Most people just make sure they tighten up. A lot of people do it all the time, have an idea about how tight it should be and how much they should pull on something. So certain things based on the size of the bolt and so forth, you'll totally different. But engineers, that's one of the things that drives engineers nuts is they specify the torque of those things, and then somebody over tightens it or something like that. Like, you guys did that and Houston got the over tightens it. And that's what it is. Okay, so that's torque wrenches. Make sense? Cool. All right. What else we got? Let's see. These are more Allen wrenches, Allen keys. So instead of having separate things that pull out, they're all in the handle, they flip out to get whatever size you want. And then you don't lose them, so because these get lost quite often. So these you don't lose because they're all together. So you pick whichever one you want, pull it out, and then you can turn it that way if you need torque. If you want to go faster, you can turn it that way. So you can use it different things. So a couple different forms for Allens. Standard and metric, they come in different ways. Questions? Cool so far? Alright, let's see, where do we go from here? Measuring tools or specialty tools? What do you think?
Especially.
Specialty tools? Alright, go bring some of them over here, Donnie. Let's see what we're going to look at. We'll put Donnie on the spot. We can explain what some of these do. Because some of them I don't know what they do. Alright, so I was pulling some of those over there. Let's take a look at this engine. This is pretty cool. So I know you guys are all on different sides there, so you may not be able to see it around here. This is a really cool pedal way. Somebody did a really nice job on this thing. So spend some time looking at these. So those of you going to be teachers, if you don't have a resource like this to help out your kids in class, something like this could be really, really handy for you. So you can see I'm turning the crankshaft. So this is the crankshaft on the engine. So we'll talk about that, see more about that as you go through videos. It turns, you can see the piston in there going up and down. So this is the combustion chamber up in here. It's where the fuel goes into, where it burns, and where it pushes down, gives you the compression. All that compression pushes this down and makes this crankshaft turn. That's really cool. Alright, so you can see that going. See all that mechanism there. What's really cool on the other side is you can see the valves opening and closing and see how the mechanism works on there. Alright, so can you all kind of see that? Can you see what's going on? So you see the piston here, so the piston is up on top, all right? So now, the piston is moving down. It's going in this direction. That's the way it should go. So with what we've learned a little bit, I know it's not all of you have watched the videos yet. Have you watched any videos? So they didn't have to be done by next week, so that's okay yet. So some of you did have. The piston's going down right now. These are the valves over here that let the gases in and out of the engine. So somebody look at that engine, maybe some of you have a little bit more experience, and tell me, as the piston's going down, what stroke is that? Is that what are the 4 strokes? Intake, power, exhaust, the compression. Yeah, the compression. So intake is first, and then compression, and then the power stroke, and then the exhaust stroke. If you haven't seen it yet, if you're going, when you watch a video, you'll see it, right? So the piston's going down. What do we see over here in these 2 valves? The intake is open. So which stroke is this if the piston's going down? It's the intake stroke. So what should be happening at this point is I should be pulling air and fuel mixture. It's coming in through here, coming up into this chamber. Of course, this will be closed on the top. It's a cutaway. So it's pulling it into the chamber. It's filling up the piston here. The piston is at the bottom. Now look what happened to this valve. Look what this valve's doing. This is at the bottom. The valve closes. And the piston's coming up. Both those valves are closed. So which stroke is this? That's the compression. So it's putting that gas in there, compressing the heck out of it, right? So hit the top. Now what's going to happen? You're going to have the power. So I'm going to make a spark with this spark plug. Light the fuel, boom, down it goes, right? So there it goes, my power stroke. Notice that my valves are still closed, so I'm pushing. I got all this pressure in here, pushing the thing down. That's the bicycle. Pushing the bicycle pedal down, making it go. We're flying the bicycle. Was that helpful? The bicycle? I thought that was kind of cool. Right? So now the piston's at the bottom. What do you see happening over there? The exhaust valve. What's that? Okay. Yep. So now the exhaust valve is opening up. So the piston's starting back up. So what's it doing? Shoving all that nasty exhaust, going down through there, coming out this hole, out through the muffler, shoving the exhaust out. Now look what happened. This is kind of cool, and we'll see this later on. You can really see it here. The exhaust valve is closing, but look at that intake valve. While the exhaust valve is still closing, the intake valve is going up. So there's some overlap there. So there's some time when both of them are actually open for a little bit. And it's because this is happening so fast. That piston's going down really, really fast. So those valves are moving really, really fast. So to be able to get it going, to get these gases starting to flow and so forth, we actually have some overlap there. And then that intake opens up and sucks more in and really, really moves. So that's really cool. We can really see all that stuff going, right? So Donnie's going to tear this engine apart, or at least show us some tools we use to tear it apart what we do with them. So bring some of them specialty tools over here. What we got? Now all these tools, and again, we're ahead of class, so all these tools, the chapter in your textbook, I'll just move this way. The chapter in your textbook does a really, really good job of explaining all these different tools, showing pictures of them and everything, and there's a paragraph or so about each one of them. So when you get to that chapter, you know, all this stuff is going to get reiterated. Bonnie's going to show you some of the specialty tools for engines that we use.
So I think the part wouldn't be too bad for the first part. Kind of easy to take the head that's on here off, and you use your ratchets, your sockets, your wrenches. So it's all here.
Yeah, we can tear it up. I think.
No. But
I don't want to see it put it back.
even putting this, even taking your, you got a head here, you got your valves, your valve springs. To remove this head, it'd be pretty simple. A lot of them come off together now. You might think about it more, you take it apart because you want to pull this piston out first, do the crank. In this case, this cylinder head is built into it. The valve is built into this head, so you pull this off, your piston's going to be like exposed, which would be fine. But if you want to quickly reassemble this, and you have a piston here, it's going to work a little different on yours because the piston, it's a little easier to put together. But you use this tool. Now,
You got that piston over there.
so you got this, imagine this right here. See how these springs are all almost flush inside the piston? Not quite though. Look how much play is in this. Right, so when this goes into the cylinder bore, it's going to squeeze together.
He's going to drop it down in the hole.
and it's going to hit.
And those things are gonna get stuck. Yep.
So what you're going to use is a ring compressor. You can over tighten this, but get your tighten down to a point where it looks like it's going together, and you kind of see the ring sticking out anymore. What's allowed to do is sit it over top of the cylinder and then kind of tap it in without catching the rings and tearing them up. If you were really doing this to be doing, you'd make sure you offset these gaps, your top rings, compression rings. Most times if you're doing this, there's a pneumatic pressure tell you a certain way to do that.
That's a ring compressor.
Now, if you get this all the way apart, you bought a kit, you blew up your engine, you're gonna rebuild it, right? So you get a kit in, you have a piston sitting here, and you have a bag of piston rings. Well, or in this case, you want to re-ring this one. So you got a little tool. I'm not really sure how this thing works, but
I'm gonna use one of those. That's what I did at work.
it's confusing me.
It is confusing.
You find the gap in the ring, which is there. Alright, use this piece here to square it apart. Like that. Now, some of these will be harder to do, some will be easier to do. Sometimes it might be cheaper to do. But put it on the proper way. Somewhere pick it off there and put it in here. You squeeze to spread it. Careful it will fly apart, fly around. Put it back on. It won't always be that easy. Certain things will be harder. That's a ring installer, piston ringer, as they call it. A ring compressor, piston ringer. So you see you have this apart, and you get down here to your valves. Now some of the valves we oriented differently. On those over there, they're kind of exposed. Take a valve cover off and it's sitting there. So these are big enough you can use your hands to compress them, but there are tools. Some look like this. You kind of get into the coils of the spring. And you tighten, turn this to compress it. And what that's going to do is release. Well, it will release the tension on the spring, allow you to move the valve, hold it up. On the bottom side of the valve, you have a spring retainer, and you have spring keepers. And the keepers are split in half, and they're kind of wedge shaped. And they fit down in there, and the ring retainer comes up and holds against it. So your spring is holding tension against the valve stem of the valve, but the valve is resting here on the cylinder head, so it can't go out. Only going open. It can't go past close, if that makes sense. Or it can't fall out. So you have that variety for that. Sometimes different engines you have a part you can use pivot. And you have some you literally just put over it and compress it down to turn the bolt.
Compressor springs.
You don't have this isn't like with keepers, you can also just place them in. You got a tool like this, you can place them in there and release the tension. They're easy to drop, they're small. And they're also keyed to fit into the stem a certain way. There's a notch for them.
And if you drop them and they go down into the engine, then you're going to spend a lot of time tearing them apart finding them.
So let's say in here we have this one. There's a bearing here run by C-clip. You have different tools to help compress that clip, or that's actually a snap ring. So you compress it, and then you can have careful fly off into the atmosphere somewhere. You do searching for it.
You end up in the trunk when you're working on your car.
If you had a fuel line or like a line on a coolant hose, you might use a pair of pliers to take that ring, compress it, move it back. These actually have a notch made, so you get the ring comes around, you can squeeze that to help. And it opens up and you can pull that bar, that hose, clamp it backwards. Yeah, go ahead and move that hose. If you were, most time you buy spark plugs these days, they're gas. You can almost bet on it. But there's different tools to gap. You can use the tool here to change the gap, larger or smaller. And you can test the gap. measure the gap. Get up a little bit.
A little tight, none of them work.
All right, so we slide in there, find a little tension as it goes across. You know, so, and that would tell you the gap in this case is about 0.020 inches.
So every engine is going to have that little gap. Every engine is going to have a specified gap for that spark. So we'll talk more about that as the semester goes on. But if it's too big, you won't get a good spark. If it's too small, you won't get a very bright spark. So you have to have just the right gap.
If you really need to, you can always read your spark plugs with this little magnet plug. That does not work at all.
No, that's the other
So
day.
that's the theory. Then you can read that, get in real close and inspect it, and just like black and gray, there'd be too much fuel. Brown and draws a little lean. Various tools like that. This is an old form of somewhere you have a spark plug wire coming up. You put it on here, and as you rotate this over, you can watch through here. You see the spark. But we don't have the entire system here, obviously. Oh, there you would, so you can check to make sure you don't have spark going through it. So plug wire on here. I'm not sure why this has 2 connection points. I would not, I wouldn't say, hey, press that. You're turning it over. But,
I like it. You got it. That's good. I just wanted to break from talking. I was talking too much. Good job, right? Alright, so again, that's kind of quick and dirty. And for a lot of you, it's like, oh, I don't even know what those parts are and everything. But you'll get to see them. So I wanted you to see these tools right now to just get an idea. Okay, there's some specialty tools out there. That, again, there's good pictures in your book. There's good descriptions of those things and how they work and everything. So that's kind of cool. And I encourage you to play with this engine and study it and see how it works, because this is a really incredible. It's pretty helpful to see how it works. So some of those specialty tools good. So the ring expander, the ring installer, the ring compressor. Hopefully we'll have time to get to that point where we have your piston and everything clear out of your engine. So we're going to be all those parts out and everything go back together at some point. So hopefully we'll get there. Hopefully, we'll see. All right. So questions about any of that? That was pretty quick and dirty. All right. So Donnie started on some of these measurement tools. So you had, where'd that plug gapper go?
Yeah.
It ended up over here. Okay, never mind. So this is where we had, looking at that's a little wide there, don't it?
that wasn't me.
That wasn't me, so something got bent there. Alright, so that's way too big, yeah. But, so all these wires, so if you look around this thing, all these wires have a very specific diameter. And they're like to the thousandths of an inch, so 25 thousandths or 20 thousandths or 32 thousandths or something like that, so they're very small. Okay. So this thing, what do we call it? Feeler gauge. Yeah, feeler gauge. We call it a feeler gauge. So this is more of measuring gaps and clearances. Okay, so this one has the wires on there that you use for the spark plug, but it's also got these flat things, and I'll pass this around so you can look at it. But all these are different sizes, and when you fan them out, there's numbers on the size, and it tells you what they are. You can actually look at it and see some of them are thicker and some of them are thinner. So certain things that we do as we put engines together, the clearance is going to be very critical. So we're going to look at ignition systems, and in our flywheel, this is the flywheel that rotates on an engine, and on the outside of these flywheels are magnets. So they're magnets that are built into these things, and there's coils that sit out here, and as that magnet turns, that's what gives us a spark, and we'll talk about how that happens. But that coil has got to be really close to that thing. They're not too close, they can't be touching. And so we'll use a feeler gauge or something like that to go in there and measure that gap. So put it in there. So that's a feeler gauge. You guys can look at that. So we'll be using that. What's that?
Business card is what they.
Yeah, that's exactly what I told you, Don.
Yeah.
So yeah, the magnet, the big heavy magnet, you stick the feeler gauge in there, most of them are metal, and they stick to it. So, but yeah, a business card or an index card or the 5,000 or whatever you need for doing that. So So yeah, that's a feeler gauge. So that's for measuring. All right. Let's see. Other measuring tools. Where's that wooden tape? That folding rule. Man, they gotta see that. That's old school.
That's right.
Oh yeah, that's one here. I didn't see it. Yeah. Anybody ever use one of these? Oh, somebody did. Wow, I'm surprised. Unfold it like that. So when I was a kid, that's what we had. So you learned how to fold them up and do it quick. And if you weren't quick, you broke them, and then Dad was really mad. But yeah, that's a tape measure, so you keep stretching out. So now we have all the tapes, of course. They're all cheap, but that was before we had tape measure technology. So there's a tape measure. So let's look at some more measuring tools. We'll give it hopefully a chance. Oh, I didn't see this one. What's that? Pipe wrench. So that'll grab onto a pipe. So adjustable there. Make it bigger or smaller. If I've got a pipe, you grab a hold of it and turn the pipe. You should never have to use this for anything in your engine. Should never have to use anything. Not to say that they never get used on engines. You should never have to use it on an engine. So, these are cool. What are these called? What is it? Yep, that one's a dial caliper, and this one is an electronic caliper. Right? So it's a dial caliper. So another measuring tool if I need to know very precise measurements. So I turn this with my thumb, and it opens up and closes, and I learned to read it. We're not going to spend a lot of time reading these today. The dial's pretty easy to do, but you can see that dial keeps turning around and around and around, so I have to learn to look at the scale over here. There's a scale on the thing, and combine that with what's on the dial to be able to measure diameter. So I can measure outside diameters like that, or I can measure inside diameters with these up here. So I can pull that in and out and measure inside diameter. So I can get down in the hole or something like that and measure with that diameter. So we'll look at our cylinder. We'll measure the inside of our cylinders on the engine and measure what the inside diameter is. And then we'll measure pistons and the outside diameters and stuff like that. So that's the way we use that to measure. So that's a dial caliper because it has a dial on it. It's all mechanical. And then the cheaters. Put a little battery into it and turn the switch on, and it gives you all the numbers right there. And guess what? You ain't gonna be allowed to use that. I'm gonna make you use the other kind so that you learn how to use them. So. But yeah, these are cheap and actually they're pretty good, so you can get them for a couple bucks. If you need to measure it, those are calipers, all right? So if you guys want to look at them, play with them a little bit, you're welcome to. All right? So we'll do some measuring. So that's one of the things that we're going to do when we tear our engines apart. We're going to do some measurements on the engines. We'll use some different tools to do that. Sometimes those tools, you know, I said you can measure inside diameter with these. So I've got this inside calipers here, but sometimes it doesn't reach down in as far as I need to. So if I need to get really way down inside of something, I will use some of these things. These are called telescoping gauges. And all they are is I loosen it up. I loosen this little nut on the bottom, and it has these spring-loaded arms that go out like that. Okay, so I'm going to take this down a little bit. So it's a little bit small. If I want to know what the diameter of that hole is down in there, so what I would do is loosen the nut, squeeze these things together. So physically squeeze it in. Tighten the nut so that holds it really small. It's not the right size. Yeah, this one working here. So squeeze it down really small, put it down in the hole that I want to measure. I'm going to loosen it. When I loosen it, those things pop out. So I'm going to make sure it's in the center. It's exactly where I want to measure, and then I tighten it. And I bring it out, and that's the diameter. So that's set to whatever that diameter was way down in there. Now I can use one of my other measuring instruments like this dial caliper, and I can grab a hold of the outside of it like that and measure that. So that's the way I can measure that inside diameter, and with a measuring tool like that. Okay. So and these can be pretty precise if you're done carefully. So real careful how you do that. So that's what's called a telescoping gauge. We will use telescoping gauge. I keep saying, if we get to that point, if you're still here in a month or so, when we get down into the inside of our engine, so we're going to get into the inside of our carburetor, and we're going to look at our carburetor because a carburetor has a throat that's really narrow. So it goes from big to small, back to big, and there's a Bernoulli thing and all that to be measured.
This is just a question that if we aren't here,
Uh-huh.
how will we like learn through video?
I have no idea.
Oh,
We will cross that bridge when we come to it. So, yeah, there might be some videos. So what I might do is make Donnie tear stuff apart, and I'll narrate. That's what we'll do.
Again.
It'll be the Donnie and Tim show. I was say that's what you did last semester. So we might do something like that. We'll do some videos.
She's already rolling her eyes going, no.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll get a lot of this done before. And that's why I'm trying to move the labs up a week, so we have the opportunity to get in that. So you're seeing all this way before you've had a chance to read about it or anything, but hopefully when you see it, you go back and read about it. It's like, oh yeah, I remember him showing me that thing. This is what it really does. There's a better picture of it and so forth. So hopefully that's going to work out for you. Maybe. I don't know. You can't see me making weird faces either. No fun. All right, so those are some pretty accurate measuring tools. So here's some other ones. You've probably seen these at some point. What are those called? Close. Micrometer. Yeah. Millicrometer. Yeah, micrometer. So micron, really small is kind of the idea. So that is another measuring tool. So you could use this to measure outside diameters. These are really. These will go down to the 10,000ths of an inch, I believe. Yep. So I have to go back and run through it again. I don't even remember how to do it.
I read it earlier.
What's that?
I read it earlier.
You read it earlier, so you remember. Thanks. So they get down to the 10,000ths of an inch. So 4 decimal places of accuracy. So they're very precise. So I can measure the diameter of something very precisely. So that's what those are for. So dial caliper is better than a tape measure. So I can measure the diameter of something. Put this tape measure on there and say, yeah, that's about 3 1/4 inches or whatever. So that would be the crudest. The dial caliper would be next. That would give me a little bit better accuracy. The micrometer then would be the most accurate measurement. So we will spend some time later on learning how to read these things, because as you turn this, you see there's marks all over the barrel that's turning. There's marks on the shank that's coming in and out. So learn how to do it. How many of you ever read these? You had to do that in high school? Yeah, so you had a chance. You remember how to do it? If you played with it a while, you could probably figure it out. Yeah. So it makes sense when you first look at it. I even have to stop because I don't use them all the time. So I have to stop and think, okay, how do you do this? And you play with it a little bit. Oh, yeah, that's how I measure it. So, but yeah, you'll get a measurement down to 4 decimal points, which is really small, just kind of cool. You can get that kind of precision out of the measurement. So that's pretty neat. Okay. So those are micrometers. Those are measurement tools that we're going to use. All right. Now, this may be one that none of you guys have ever seen. Have you ever seen these things?
Checking it out.
Plastic gauge, yeah. So you've seen it? Heard of it? Okay. So, yeah. That is a gauge right there. There's a little bit of it left. What? Okay, so you see that little thing that's a little piece of, I think it's clay or plastic of some kind, but it's a malleable material, and usually when it comes there's a whole string of it in here, so this whole thing is full. So these are kind of old, that's why I'm being kind of delicate with them. This one still has its stuff in it, I think, yeah. So here's one with a little bit more material in it, so you can see that string that goes all the way through there. So when I want to measure clearances between something, where I might do this is, hand me that connecting rod. So this connecting rod, and we'll see this, it goes on the crankshaft and it rotates, okay? So the clearance of this crankshaft in there is pretty critical. If this is too loose, if this piece that goes in there is loose and this rattles and bangs, that engine's going to last about 30 seconds before it tears itself apart, right? If this is too tight, there's going to be a lot of friction and the engine's not going to run well. It's not going to give me good power. So I got to have just the right amount of clearance, the right amount of gap in there. Well, I'm tightening this thing on there and that thing is in there. It's like, how do I measure that clearance or that gap? And so what you do is you take a little piece of this stuff. So that red thing, I take a little piece of it and I lay it on top of this crank journal, this crank bearing, put it in there, tighten it down the way I'm supposed to, loosen it up and take it out. Now, the piece of thing in there was round, and when I squish it, what happens when I squish it? It went from being round to
Flattens it out.
flattening out. Yeah, so it's going to flatten out. So then what I do is look at the gauge on the sticker. So these different, how much does it get squashed out? So is it squashed out that much? Or the little thicker line or the really thick line? So I kind of lay this along there and say, okay, it's squished out about that wide, so that's about 2 thousandths of an inch. So that's what that clearance would be. So you kind of match up how much is squished out to what that marker is going there. So it's a destructive test, but that's the way you can test something inside. So they call these plasti gauge, is what they call it typically. So there's something kind of wonky and weird and different, right? But that's a common tool to measure that. How else do you get in there to measure that clearance? I can't stick something in there. I can't stick something in there that's 2 thousandths of an inch thick. It would just fall apart. Like that thing is cool. Yeah. And you can see how it works. What do you think? Is that enough to chew on for one day? Are you overwhelmed? A little bit? You're kind of following it? Alright, so this is a head. You've seen the stuff again. There's textbook reading that has all these things laid out, so that's going to help you, and we'll look at that next week. Adjust the material and then move the labs up as appropriate. So there's 2 of them. So cool things. Anything else we should show, Johnny? What else is on there? We didn't show any pliers. Some pliers. Those are pretty obvious, but should be some slip joints in the channel. There's channel lock. Should be some slip joints in the. Yep. The pliers we didn't show. So, what do we call these? Yeah, channel locks. Channel lock again is a brand, but I don't even know if they have another name. I guess adjustment pliers? I don't even know. Because everybody everywhere calls them channel lock. Channel lock is a brand name, so it's a pair of pliers. It's got grooves on here. So if I need to get a hold of something big, what I do is open them up, I slide them out, and then I can grab a hold of something big. Get something a little bigger. If I need to get something smaller, I open them up, I slide them in, and then I can grab something small. So they're adjustable pliers that have a little different size stuff. So unlike the vice grips or the locking pliers, these don't lock. Maybe the lock is with my grip stand, so I've got to hold them so they don't actually snap in place to give me an extra lock, which is what I can hold with my mechanical advantage. So that's channel locks, really adjustable. Slip joints. These are adjustable too, but there's only 2 positions. So there's a small position, you pull them out to the right place and slide them, and then there's a big position. So they call these a slip joint pliers because that joint will slip back and forth. So slip joint pliers. You have all different kinds of designs inside here. Some of them are just flat jaws. This one has a couple different holes. So you can grab different shaped things or whatever you need to squeeze and do something with. So all kind of variations of it. These are called needle nose, yep, so you reach up there and pull stuff out. You think I was going to do that? Not sure sometimes, not sure about that. So yeah, if I need to get in a hold, get something small, I'm going to reach in the hole, pull things out. Just whatever you need to do, whatever tool you need to reach into a place to get at. There's all kind of variations on these. One of the ones I find most handy is I have a pair that this needle is curved. So I use them a lot for grabbing stuff, and I do some model train things and stuff like that. So I'm always using them to reach down into holes and hold stuff and solder things. The knees are cutters, so side cutters. We call them diagonals. Sometimes people call them diagonal or side cutter. So that's purely a cutting, so a cutting wire or something like that. The cool thing is that the cutting edge is right on the surface, so if I need to cut something really close, I can do that. Probably one of the most common things we cut with, and then zip tie still over there somewhere. Just put it in there. So zip tie is probably the most common thing you cut with these things, right? So put a zip tie on something, zip it up, you get the big long piece, and then you clip it off. You need to get rid of them, you clip it on the end. Do that. So those are side cutters. Ah, somebody stole them already. Man, we found the 7 squirreled away, and somebody stole the zip ties. Yeah, it's a commodity.
I think that's the one thing that for people that don't know what they are, everybody should know what zip ties are.
What zip ties are. So we really should find the zip ties.
Here
tire, and then they invented zip tires, and so now zip tires lives on the road. And they're cheap.
There you go. There's one here.
Little bitty one. Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh, it already came off, so a little baby zip tie. Yep, somebody already put it. There's a little baby zip tie. So yeah, little knot on the end, a big long plastic thing, you all see it, you put it through, you pull it tight, zip it. Put them off, so zip ties are cool. So you can fix the world. I had a county agent call me one time. It wasn't zip ties. It was an old Grouchy County. I just moved here and just started working here, so I had met him once and didn't know much about him. It was Greg Henson. I don't know if you ever met Greg Henson either. Gnarly old guy. And he left a voicemail message on the phone one time. He said, "What I want to know is, as long as we got baling wire and duct tape, what in the H do we need engineers for?" So give me a call. That was it. That was all that was on the voice message. And I'm like, what? I listened to it about 3 times. He's like, "I think that must be Greg." And I called him up. "Yeah, it was me." I'm like, "Well,
I can get you the wire.
yeah, there's the wire. Yeah, there's the baling wire right there. So you can fix a lot of baling. All right, so there's your tools. Cool things, cool deal. So hopefully you all learned a little bit. So everybody on the whole spectrum learned a little bit of something, I hope. And we'll go. What's that?
So we buy some 12-point sockets.
Yeah, 12 points or 6 points?
I got a bunch of 6. So.
Yep. 12 points, so you can move a little bit easier, they'll fit in, they'll snap on a little quicker, you don't need to, you didn't wind up with it. Yep, that's the difference, so. I know it's careful about what I wind up. Well, awesome, see you guys on Monday then. So
Thank you.
we're good, yeah.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you work for Case?
I did. Hey, hold on a minute. Everybody come back. Let me answer your question in just a little bit. I did, let's see, I've got Haley and Langdon. You guys are going to work together in a group, and Kyle and Brent. Is there anybody else that wanted to work together in a group? Would you prefer to have your own engine or
Work in a group.
So, are you guys comfortable doing that? So, do we have an odd number? We're not going to have an odd number because you're
Yeah,
switching
I'm
over to
going
the other group, so we're going to have an even number. You want to work by yourself? You work with somebody else? So
Yeah,
we can, I can do 3. If we have an odd number, I'll let one group work on 3. A lot of times, what I'm going to make sure is if you've got 3, that you're all taking turns doing something. So, and especially, you know, and I'll take the risk on this and go gender on you because I could probably lose my job for it. But my experience is that the ladies will stand back and let guys do it, and that makes me mad because I want you all to get your hands in there and do something. So you guys are working together. That's awesome. We have to do it. So I want to make sure that everybody is participating. We don't have one person doing the work and somebody else just watching. So to make sure that everybody's doing something as they're working together. All right, so good. Yep. So well, we're all going to learn from each other, and we're going to spend some time. We're all going to participate. So awesome. So now we know what we got to plan for in terms of engines and space and everything. So that's good. So again, if you guys aren't comfortable, you want to spread out. You know, we've got a couple of pairs, so we do have enough if somebody wants to work on their own engine. So we can do that either way, whatever you want to do. So Case
Yeah.
for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I took a sabbatical leave back in 2012, and I went to work for Case for 6 months. So
Okay.
I was actually still paid by the university, but I went and it was great help for them. But so I got to work with their innovation group and do some cool stuff. It was really
Oh,
fun. So
Interesting. I was just asking because I'm a marketing intern for John Deere.
okay,
And I've had an internship with them for 2 summers now. And I was just wondering, because what I do basically, I do like a lot of marketing stuff, but I know like field reps and like field managers and stuff who like actually work with the dealers and stuff. So just like being able to learn this stuff is like helping me if I do work for them and I become like something in the field, I'll know. So
right.
that's all I was gonna say.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And they probably have interns. Yeah, there you go. You set that up.